Hello everyone and welcome to my very first DJ Lab talking video. In this clip I show you how to program beats and patterns in the style of my other performances on this channel using a basic 16-step sequencer style drum machine. I'm working with the new Behringer RD-9, the clone of the infamous Roland TR-909, but as long as your instrument is capable of things like trig probability, flams and beat repeat, I promise you to get something out of this video. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Let's start with a rather basic beat consisting of kick, clap, hats and maybe a few snares as a foundation and work our way from there. I'll begin with a kick drum on every quarter note to create a nice 4 to the floor kind of pattern. Double tapping the steps on the RD-9 sends the notes straight to the accent feature, achieving a louder, more pronounced sound while allowing regular trigs to be used as ghost or grace notes, but more on that later. Additionally, loud kicks are very common in techno and ensure the pulse of the music to be heard and felt at all times, punching through even the densest mixes, providing orientation for the ears and dancing feet. Here is how it sounds on its own. As you can probably tell, I'm at quite the fast tempo, 140 BPM. While choosing a tempo is a matter of preference and music style, I generally try to aim for a nice driving groove right from the start, so that adding layers to the sequence doesn't feel like a necessity. To me, a faster tempo helps with this, especially when creating techno music. A little pitch bend on the kick adds dimension to the sound, while longer decay times give the bend more space to play with. Be careful though, while long and fat kicks sound great on their own, you'll want to leave at least some space for other sounds in the lower frequency range, or you're in for a muddy mix. Next, we'll add a clap on beats 2 and 4, emphasizing every other kick from our 4 to the floor pattern and thusly creating rhythmic tension. Rhythmic tension is what makes a beat interesting and occurs when placing accents against the natural distribution of stronger and weaker notes. I won't dive too deep into the theory here, but as a rule of thumb, just assume every other beat of a given subdivision to be naturally weaker. As of now, we are working with quarter notes only, leaving the beats 2 and 4, also called backbeats, as the weak ones. The same thing applies to offbeat hi-hats, the only difference being that we're now in 8-note territory, making the ands, counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the relatively weaker beat, and also giving a double time feel to our groove. Using the RD-9 I'll definitely go with the open hats here, because I just love the sound of them and want to keep the closed hats in the back pocket for later. Here's what we've got so far. Next up, following this logic, would be 16th notes, right? But instead of adding the in-between notes only, I like to go for a nice and even roll here, using the note repeat set on 16th notes for a more convenient way to record the trigs. The relatively high frequency of the 16th notes adds even more intensity to our groove. Using a noisy sound with lots of trigability for this allows the roll to be also used as a riser or build-up kind of sound. Snares and closed hats work best here, but since the RD-9 doesn't have a dedicated level knob on the closed hats and them interacting with the open hats, I went with a snare. Walking your way up the subdivisions like this teaches you how to gradually build up momentum on a track, kind of like a steam engine starting slow and making its way up to speed. I'd also like to add that starting with a basic beat like this also gives you a steady foundation to build your groove on, allowing you to add virtually anything without jeopardizing the readability of your sequence. Additionally, understanding the concept of rhythmic tension in those basic patterns helps a lot when doing more sophisticated stuff. Speaking of sophisticated stuff, let's add some extra notes to our kick pattern. Starting basic again, we could add an unaccented kick to one or more of the offbeat notes. When using the last one of the bar, we can create a nice little turnaround, giving our sequence a notion of acceleration when restarting the loop. But every offbeat works in the same way, as it emphasizes the next quarter note kick. Placing kicks on the 16th notes has a similar, maybe a bit more groovy type of effect, emphasizing the quarter note kick drum right before or after them, depending on the placement. As you probably noticed, our pattern got rather cluttered really fast. So let's use Trig probability to regain some space. On the RD-9 we have to push settings and step 9 to access the probability menu. After setting the desired percentage, we have to choose which trigs to be affected by the probability, and we're done. When setting the value, I like to think of the bars I want the variations to take place in. For example, if I want the trig to play approximately every other bar, I'll set the probability to around 50%. Most of the times though, I'll go a bit lower than the exact mathematical value to avoid cluttering. Toms can be used to mimic bass or synth sounds, especially in conjunction with a filter like on the RD-9. As mentioned earlier, beware of muddying up the mix by overlapping low frequencies. To do this, try to avoid placing toms on trigs that are already occupied by the kick drum, or at least leave out the quarter notes. Try to choose one: busy kicks or busy tom patterns. Apart from that, the same rules apply that were stated on the kick variations. Another way to make your toms feel more like a synth is to utilize the note repeat on higher settings, like 64th or 32nd notes. To add rhythmic depth to your bass line, try using an odd time polymeter by pressing settings and step 7. Setting the length of the sequence of the toms only to a multiple of 3, 5 or 7. As the closed heads on the RD-9 get cancelled by the open heads, we have every step but the offbeats to play with. I usually go with a few 16th notes to add some spice, but you could also go for the quarter notes, maybe emphasizing one of the claps or the kick on 3 to add rhythmic tension. When placing percussive elements like rim shots, cowbells or ride cymbals, I like to go for samba style patterns. While being a drummer helps a lot here, you could always try punching holes in a 16th note roll to see what you can come up with. The crash cymbal usually occupies the very first beat to relieve tension built before by rolls, fills or other variations. As I find them to be rather old school and a tad bit cheesy, I tried to capitalize on this and programmed a little rising pattern that allows you to play with the mute feature of the RD-9 for even more diversity. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you find this kind of content useful, so if you do, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you next time.